told you in this next video that we were going to take this dynamic of compliance and put it together into a pattern of professional conduct, a standard that is going to protect you. It's going to increase the number of people, if you use this properly and sort of by the book, so to speak, you'll see the instances of your voluntary compliance increasing, and you'll also have that umbrella of protection because you're following this professional standard of conduct. So we started out looking at the simple offender. We said that they need an education. They want to know the answer to the question, what do I need to do? What do you want me to do? And so you ask them for compliance. Typically you'll get it. If you're dealing with a higher level of offender, they're going to challenge you. They want to know why. Sir, I need you to, may I see your driver's license, please? Well, why? Well, because in the state of South Carolina, the law says. Not because I said so, that's why. That sets up an ego battle. No, it's because the law says, policy says, procedures, sheriff, chief, constitution, whatever. Usually it's going to be a law or policy in dealing with law enforcement situations. Unless you're dealing with internal discipline, if you're a supervisor, then you might be looking at, well, the chief said or the sheriff said. But that's kind of the framework for dealing with the silly offender that's going to challenge your authority, not going to comply the first time out. The central offender, motivated by selfish interest, feels good, do it, kind of an attitude, sensual pleasures, and so they want to know what's in it for me. So they need mediation cut across their experiences. Let me explain to you what's going to happen if you don't comply, and you lay out 3 or 4 or 5 consequences that you've already thought about ahead of time, perhaps. It's kind of hard to think about them on the spur of the moment. You might. Some of you are good at that. But you have some in your quiver. You can pull out fire, some lures in your tackle box. I kind of like that analogy, that you can float out there in the stream and see if the fish are biting on that particular one. Then if they are, you reel them in. That's the central offender. Scorning offender takes you to the next level. They need confirmation. They want to know, are you really serious about this? So you're going to use that phraseology I told you about with the last chance. Sir or ma'am, is there anything I can say or do to gain your cooperation just for tonight? If they comply, wonderful. If they don't, my partner is getting ready. It's a signal, it's a tactical signal that he knows we're fixing to go physical. And if you're dealing with a steadfast offender, they are absolutely going to push you into physical confrontation. You may, at that point, and at that point only, resort to physical force. And we say you act. That is your ACT. I use that as an acronym for aggression control tactics. I actually have a police self-defense course that I develop and teach that's called that, aggression control tactics, ACT. When words fail, act, right? When words fail, all of this has been so far is about words. It's verbal judo. It's tactical communications. But when words fail to get compliance, the voluntary compliance, we have to go to involuntary compliance, which is the use of physical force. So when words fail, act, which means I've gone through this entire pattern. See, I've started with the simple offender, and I've asked them for compliance. They didn't comply. I went to the silly offender, and I gave them an explanation and appealed to a higher authority, and they didn't comply. I went to the central offender, where I told them, I answered the question, what's in it for them, explained some of the consequences. They didn't comply. Now I'm at the scorning offender. Sir, is there anything I can say or do to gain your cooperation just for tonight? Give them a last chance. They want to know, am I really serious about this? And if they fail to comply, then we've got the steadfast offender, which requires either physical force or the real and present threat of physical force. Appropriate, of course, within the circumstances. The continuum of force still applies. But so it's got to be commensurate with the threat and the level of resistance, etc. But that, that's not the topic specifically I'm talking about here. So, but we are in that realm of physical force here, involuntary compliance. And I have a pattern. See, I have a pattern of compliance that starts with the simple and goes all the way to the steadfast. And at any point along this pattern, along this path, I can gain compliance. As soon as I gain compliance, it stops. They've complied. Maybe they complied with one part. Maybe they gave me their driver's license, but now I want them to step out of the car, and they're not complying. Or maybe now I want them to put their hands behind their back, and they're not complying. Or maybe now I want them to empty out their pockets at the jail, and they're not complying. Well, I'll go through the whole process again. Time permitting and safety permitting, I would go through the whole process. Now, we understand there's sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes time doesn't permit. There's a conflicting priority, or there's some other threat, or there's a safety issue, or maybe the guy's running. I'm not going to go through this whole pattern, while they're running, but or maybe they've got a weapon. If they've got a gun pointed at me, I'm probably not going to go through the whole pattern. Sir, would you please put the gun down, and ask for compliance. They don't say, well, sir, the law of the state of South Carolina says you can't point a gun at a police officer. Please put the gun down. Or let me explain to you what's going to happen if you don't put the gun. I don't have the safety scenario has changed now, and I may have to resort to physical force instantly to neutralize that threat. We understand that. We're not taking away any of those options from you. I'm just saying whenever time and safety considerations allow, we would like to go through this pattern. Let's change the scenario up slightly. Maybe he doesn't have a gun. Maybe he's got a knife. And maybe I've got him contained where there's no innocent life threatened, and I have him contained where he can't escape, and there's enough safety distance between him and the other officers. Now I might go through that scenario. That knife doesn't present the immediate threat that a gun would in that scenario when I have him contained and have him isolated. Then I might say, sir, please put the gun or the knife down in that scenario. The knife, not a gun. Please put the knife down. If he doesn't comply, well, sir, the law says you can't have the knife. You can't threaten people with that knife. Put the knife down. And he fails to comply. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen if you don't put the knife down. We're going to come in with the pepper spray or the beanbag guns or whatever force is necessary, the taser, in order to get you to comply. We're going to arrest you. We're taking you in, and the whole scenario of that. Or if that doesn't result in compliance, then I might say, sir, is there anything I can say or do to gain your cooperation? Put that knife down, just for tonight, and we'll see if they comply. Great, done my job. Everybody goes home safe. And if not, well, now we've got to take it to the higher level of force. So time and safety permitting, I would go through this pattern. And this pattern protects you. I'm telling you, it protects you from liability, from public criticism, from all sorts of issues that are associated with our use of force or threatened use of force in terms of taking people into custody or enforcing the law or the rules within a detention facility. And it's important for a number of reasons. Number one, because it is a professional standard of conduct, you've got people that will come to your aid if you get in trouble over this. In other words, if you follow that pattern and you end up going physical and you end up hurting a guy, you shoot him or you break an arm or something, or nerve damage from the handcuff app, whatever it is, and you get sued because of it, you've got people like me, you've got people like the instructors from the Verbal Judo Institute that you can bring in as expert witnesses that will testify and back you up on it. And some of you are saying, well, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a cop for 20-something years, and I got my own scenario. I got my own system that I use, and it works for me. And that's fine. Listen, if it works for you, that's fine. But just think about this. What happens if the day ever comes where it doesn't work and you've got to resort to force and you get sued and you don't have a cadre of expert witnesses to back you up? You don't have policy or training curriculum to back you up on the pattern that you used, and you're kind of out there on your own. As long as it works, it's fine. But when it doesn't work, now we have a problem, an issue that you're going to have to deal with. And so, think about it. Put yourself from the standpoint of a juror. All right, you're on the jury. An officer has been sued for improper use of force, and the suspect got injured some way or another. A lawsuit has happened as a result, and you're on the jury now. And you hear that the policeman that's accused is on the stand, and the attorney is questioning him and says, well, officer, when you first pulled, I guess it'd be the plaintiff in this case, you first pulled the plaintiff over for this traffic violation, what was the first thing you did? Well, I identified myself as a law enforcement officer, and I asked him to produce his driver's license. And did he comply? No, he didn't. What did he do? Well, he asked me why. And what did you say? Well, I told him that in the state of South Carolina, that the law says that you've got to surrender your driver's license when a police officer pulls you over for a traffic violation, assuming you had reasonable grounds to pull him over to start with. And what did the plaintiff do then, officer? Well, he didn't give me his driver's license. Well, what did you do? Well, I told him exactly what was going to happen if he didn't comply. Well, what'd you tell him? I told him that I would have to arrest him we would have to tow his vehicle. He wouldn't be able to stay at home with his family tonight. I told him his car was going to be towed. I told him if he got convicted, he'd have a criminal history. And then I asked him, is that really the kind of trouble that you need tonight? And, well, officer, how do you know that's all that you said all that? Well, because I documented it right here in my police report. And in addition to that, hopefully, maybe we got a video. If we don't, certainly we want to have the documentation. And, well, then what happened, officer? Well, then I gave him a last chance. Well, what'd you say? I said, sir, is there anything that I can say or do to gain your cooperation just for tonight? Officer, is that exactly what you said that night? Oh, yes, sir. That's exactly what I said. How do you know that that's exactly what you said? Well, because that's what I always say. That's what I've been trained to say. And in fact, I wrote it down right here in my report, but I always say it that way because that's the standard. Well, did the plaintiff comply and surrender his driver's license at that point? No, sir, he didn't. Well, what did you and your fellow officers do? We opened the door and we forcibly drug him out of the vehicle to put the handcuffs on him, and in the process of the scuffle, he received an injury that's resulted in this, and this is the reason that we're here today, is because he's saying it was unjustified. Or now, if you're on the jury and you hear it presented in much that same way, following that pattern, I mean, how many? I know we have some unreasonable jurors out there. I know juries do crazy things. I've been I understand. I've seen that happen firsthand. But if you are what reasonable juror is going to look at that and say, well, no, the officer acted too soon. I mean, the officer jumped the gun. Yeah, he never should have laid hands on him at that point. He should have given him more opportunities to comply. I don't really think there's that many reasonable people out there that would say that that was improper or unjustified, or change the scenario to the jail that we've been using. Sir, we got to come in and do an inspection of the cell. Would you please step out of the cell? No, I'm not coming out. Or why? And you say, well, because the policy says that before I can come into the cell, I've got to have you come out of the cell so I can conduct this inspection, both for your safety and for mine. Will you please step out? No, I'm not coming out. Well, that's fine, but let me explain to you exactly what's going to happen if you don't come out. We're going to bring in the extraction team. We're going to use pepper spray. We're going to be geared up. We're going to use whatever force is necessary. You're going to be put in disciplinary segregation. You're going to lose your commissary privileges. You're going to lose visitation privileges. You're going to lose phone call privileges. You're going to lose television privileges. And we lay out some of those hooks. Well, what did the plaintiff do next? Well, he still didn't come out of the cell. Well, what did you do? I said, sir, is there... And you said, sir? Yes, of course. I always say sir because I'm always respectful. But he was being disrespectful to you, calling you every name in the book. Yeah, but that doesn't faze me because, I've been trained not to respond to that type of thing emotionally or from an ego position. So yeah, I said, sir, is there anything I can say or do to gain your cooperation just for tonight? And what did the plaintiff do then? Did he come out? No, he didn't. What did you do? We did exactly what we said we were going to do. Went in, drug him out, he got hurt in the process. Now let me just tell you a couple things in this scenario from a practical point of view. If I'm the officer, the detention officer at that jail cell, and I see this guy's pushing me right up to the limit, I've given him that last chance to comply, he hasn't complied, and assuming that the time and the safety considerations are not getting in the way, then I'm going to get my team ready. I'm going to call in for the extraction team, right? I'm going to get them ready. They're going to be geared up, and they're going to be queued up, ready to go to the jail. I'm also going to have a videographer. See, in a jail setting, I've got usually I have the advantage of time and a contained situation, usually. I'm going to bring a videographer in. And I'm going to have the videographer record everything that's about to happen. And then I'm going to go through the entire pattern again on video because I want it documented. Sir, I'm going to ask you again. Please step out of the cell. Why? Well, because the policy says you must come out of the cell. I'm stating the policy. I'm stating the authority for my actions. Well, I'm not coming out. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen. I'll tell you again what's going to happen. And A, B, C, D, I spell it out for him. Well, I'm still not coming out. Well, sir, is there anything I can say or do to gain your cooperation just for tonight? No, you can kiss my butt. Now we go in. And now we get it all on video. And that's, ideally, that'd be the best possible scenario. So hopefully this has been meaningful to you, seeing how these 5 types of offenders that we looked at in the dynamic of discretion in evaluating what level of enforcement authority, which enforcement option are we going to use in dealing with a particular offender, and now how to gain their compliance. And by going through this pattern, what George Thompson would call a kata, which is a term often used in the martial arts to designate a pattern of physical moves. This is a pattern of verbal moves. By using this pattern, I've established this professional standard of conduct. It's an umbrella of protection for you and your other officers, and it will generate voluntary compliance the vast majority of the time. You got that very, very small percentage. They're going to push it to the limit. You're going to have to use physical force. You're trained for that. You use it as a last resort. You use the appropriate force that's necessary as long as time and safety conditions permit. If they don't, then you may have to accelerate through this process or skip some steps and go directly to physical force. But if time and safety factors allow you to do that, I promise you the time that you invest out there on the street or in this encounter in the jail, the time you invest now, it's going to pay dividends in the future, just from the standpoint of doing the paperwork. You will recover that time by not having to do the additional paperwork and the additional interviews and the additional heartburn and aggravation as you go through depositions and testimony and all the other stress associated with that. You'll just eliminate that by investing, a few extra minutes up front in dealing with this dynamic of compliance. I hope this has been helpful. I say take it out in the street and use it. Rehearse it a few times. If I was doing this live training, we'd break you up into groups and I'd have you go and rehearse and go through these exact scenarios, the car stop scenario, the detention cell extraction scenario, so that you've got it programmed into your brain, because it's a tactic. And it's just like a physical tactic. You've got to practice it. If you don't practice your physical tactics, drawing your firearm or applying your handcuffs or manipulating a wrist into a takedown move or a strike or whatever it might be, if you're not practicing it, you're not going to have it in that moment of stress and pressure out there on the street or in the detention or corrections facility. So use it, try it. I'd love to get feedback from you. I'd love for one of you to send me an email or put a post on the blog, which is even better. Put a post on the blog and say, hey, Ray Nash, I tried that technique and it's a bunch of garbage. It didn't work. And maybe we can look at why it didn't work. Or maybe you say, man, it worked like a charm. I can't believe it. It was just like a miracle. I've used it on the street. I first heard it at Verbal Judo, and I thought it sounded kind of hokey until I used it on the street. And I have used it a number, and I don't work the street like a lot of you do every day. I mean, I was always mostly, not always, but mostly in administration. But every now and then I got out there in the field, and every single time I've used this worked. Now that doesn't mean that it will work 100% of the time. In terms of generating voluntary compliance, it should work 100% of the time because I follow the pattern correctly. When I get to physical force, that's part of the system. But I've had it generate voluntary compliance all the way up there to the fourth step, the fourth of giving that last chance. So try it, see if it works. I'd love to get some feedback from you on this, and if you run any problems with it, let's hash it out and talk about it. And if I can help you with any of this stuff, please let me know. The blog is designed to be interactive. That's what a blog is. I love to get the feedback from you so I know what's going on out there in the real world. And as long as there's interest out there, and as long as I'm getting some positive feedback from you, the audience, the Police Dynamics audience, I will try to continue to produce these videos as I can and post them on the blog. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort, as you might imagine, but it's encouraging to me when somebody sends me an email or a blog post. Hey, I really appreciate what you're sharing. Thanks for keep the videos coming. It's been meaningful to me, and as long as I'm getting that kind of feedback, and God willing, I'll continue to do this. So, Sheriff Ray Nash, until next time, and we'll come up with whatever the next dynamic is going to be that we'll explore the next time around in the next video series. Thanks.